Over the weekend, soccer magnate Rocco Commisso passed away, and many remembrances were made over the weekend concerning his impact on Fiorentina and Italian soccer. But he has many chapters that had an impact on soccer right here in the States.
I mean, this guy's story, it deserves a book, right? And if I had the time and somebody wanted to pay me for it, I might write this book. I mean, and there are people who have covered him in New York, which is where he was from, and obviously now, or most recently, his impact on Italian football, probably better equipped than me. I would like to read this book. I remember, I've been covering American soccer for a long time, and when Rocco burst upon the scene, like Rocco Commisso was the Kool-Aid man of American soccer when he showed up to buy the New York Cosmos. What we're talking about, 2016. New York Cosmos, in a moment where it looked like they might collapse. We had the One World Sport and these other kind of not shady. I don't want to say shady, but there were some things about the Cosmos that were not solid. Now, a lot of this had to do with the business of NESL, right? And there was a real question of the continued existence of the NASL. And you could argue that Rocco Commisso saved the NASL by buying the New York Cosmos. But of course, Rocco was a boat rocker. Rocco was a guy who wasn't going to stand pat, and he had very strong beliefs about how soccer should operate in the United States of America. Now, he was an old world guy, right? Moved to the United States as a kid. His connections to football, to soccer, were through his Italian heritage. He saw the way Italy did it and the way Europe did it, and he thought this is the way we should be doing it in America. And he was willing to put his money down on that idea. And he sued U.S. Soccer. What is the timing on that? What, 2017, Rob? He
Yep.
files a lawsuit against U.S. Soccer. He subsequently made an offer to U.S. Soccer. I will invest $500 million in U.S. Soccer, he said, if you let me sit down with the president and give you my vision and basically kind of not bully, but encourage Carlos Cordero, then the president of U.S. Soccer, to move in a direction that Rocco presumed or perceived to be the better one for U.S. Soccer. And look, this comes down largely to promotion and relegation. Right? I think it's a simplification to say it's about pro-rel, but Rocco's, at his heart, he was a pro-rel guy. And so that he brought that energy to American soccer. Now, obviously, the NASL collapsed under the weight of attempting to challenge MLS. You could argue maybe NASL doesn't collapse if Rocco isn't there behind the scenes pushing things in a direction that was a lot more antagonistic and ambitious. It collapsed. The lawsuit continues. We finally had some sort of adjudication on the lawsuit about a year ago. Rob, in February of 2025, a federal jury found in favor of U.S. Soccer and MLS in the antitrust lawsuit that was filed by NASL, which was backed by Rocco. I mean, he was in that lawsuit. He was the guy making it go. They accused U.S. Soccer and MLS of colluding to hold back the competition that NASL could bring to the table. And we're not going to go into every little detail of all of this, but this was something that hung over the heads of American soccer for a long time. And I don't have, if you're an MLS fan, you could have some ill will towards Rocco Commisso, because you could say, well, this is a guy that came in and made a bunch of noise and caused a bunch of problems and accused MLS of this, and accused U.S. Soccer of that, made U.S. Soccer have to spend all this money on defending themselves in court, et cetera, et cetera. You could find a way to be hostile towards Rocco. If you're on the other side of it, obviously, Rocco's your hero, right? MLS, U.S. Soccer, they for a lot of people, they are colluding, right? They are the powers that be in American soccer, and they're holding it back. I kind of in the middle on this. I don't know. People are maybe not surprised. I talked to Rocco a lot. I liked Rocco as a personality, but I also think that maybe Rocco, in the sense that he had the money to do it and he was a big personality, maybe wasn't as effective as he could have been. Like, there are other ways he could have gone about what he did and impacted American soccer in real and significant ways. Now, I see a comment in the chat. By the way, become an ultra so you can get your comments on screen. We might be getting USL D1 thanks to him. You could argue that like the series of events that leads us to this moment with USL launching a D1 and launching Pro-Rel might, you could put that in the column. Rocco Commisso helped make that happen, Rob.
Yeah, he was definitely the antagonist of modern American soccer. And while you said he did rock the boat, you'd say he was a disruptor of the space. He
Yes,
had enough
sure.
money to challenge the federation and the powers that be that many in soccer did not have. So he was able to drag that lawsuit out. And while ultimately he didn't achieve the ultimate success of what he was looking for, but he did dismantle quite a bit of structures and did expose those relationships that he found inappropriate as well. So he kind of
Yeah.
poked the bear, and he had enough commitment and enough resources in his bank account to kick the can over and over and over again over the course of what, 8 years to get that result, and to the commenter's point, to get us to where we are now. He is a piece in the puzzle that gets us to this exact moment. When he filed originally this lawsuit, when asked about it, this is per an old ESPN article. He says, winning 6 games in 85 years of World Cup competition is nothing to brag about. We are a failed soccer nation. We are then, we still are now. The USSF has to be fixed. It has to become an independent regulatory agency, period. End of story. That some deals should not exist and the favoritism towards MLS should stop.
Well, okay. Again, Rocco was on the other side of the coin when it comes. He wasn't part of the MLS group. And now if he had bought into MLS in the beginning, if he was a guy that had influence in the early days of MLS, then maybe he wouldn't feel this way. I don't know, right? Or maybe he could have been a guy behind the scenes who could have pushed MLS in a more ambitious direction, which we're seeing now with people like Jorge Mas, right? So, Rocco could have been that guy. He was not, and he obviously saw a different path. And look, I do not begrudge the man the right to push his vision, right? This isn't to say like, oh, he shouldn't have sued U.S. Soccer. If there was antitrust, if there was trust-like behavior, if there was collusion, if this was something illegal under the system of laws in America, then of course he had every right to sue. He had every right to go after U.S. Soccer and MLS. I will point out that one of the funnier thing, funny, I don't know if this is the right word, one of the more interesting elements of the story about Rocco's lawsuit is that it came out during the trial, or during the process, that Rocco Commisso was on Twitter with an anonymous account bashing U.S. Soccer. He had a burner, and Rocco couldn't help himself from going to Twitter to take shots at U.S. Soccer, at MLS. So, he was, because he knew some things about the discovery and some of the other elements, and he was involved in the lawsuit. Of course, he was saying things that were like, oh, somebody, who's this person that knows something about the inner workings of American soccer? Rocco Commisso was a character. The world is poorer for his passing. I'm not necessarily always on the side of billionaires, but Rocco had his quirks and he had his things. But man, I enjoyed interacting with Rocco when he was around in a major part of American soccer. Of course, when it became clear that the lawsuit wasn't going to move quickly enough for anything real to happen in American soccer, and obviously Rocco was spending money hand over fist year after year to keep the lawsuit going, he of course bought Fiorentina in Italy. He dived in head first into trying to make Fiorentina into a power of Italian football. It's not going great this year. Obviously, his passing is now obviously going to be a part of the story for Fiorentina in 2026, 2025, 26. I remember he talked about how difficult it was to get things done in Italy. Everything's old, and they have rules. You can't just tear stuff down because it goes back to the medieval times or to the Renaissance. So he had some frustrations there. He became more of an Italian soccer figure over the last couple of years than an American soccer figure. And, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't remark and acknowledge his passing.
Yeah. Do you think that some of his quirks might have been some of his undoing, or is he just the leader of a kind of a big organizations and relationships to overcome? Because like you said, the burner account and some of the stuff that he said on the burner account was you'd maybe file it under petty or very personal, or
that's never a good look.
Character slandering sort of a territory. Do you think that's kind of what maybe underdid him, or is just the timing who he was and compared to who he's battling?
Well, I think that they weren't able to prove what they wanted to prove in court. It didn't measure up to the level that Rocco claimed it did, at least in court. Again, I'm not telling you that U.S. Soccer and MLS didn't collude against NASL. I don't know for sure, but the law says, or the decision was, they didn't do that in a way that was going to lead to the change that Rocco wanted to create in American soccer, right? And again, he talked about pushing U.S. soccer in various ways, and he was creative in that way. But again, he was also like a lot of people with a lot of money who think they can just get their way through out of bullying or certainly throwing their weight around with their money. And the fact that he went to Twitter to bash U.S. soccer, that's bad judgment, right? That's his emotional stake in what was going on in American soccer probably hurt him in the end.
All right, Rocco Commisso, soccer magnate, both in the United States and over in Italy, passes at the age of 76.